I just want to start a business. I have this service that I'm going to provide, I don't know, breathwork sessions.
Yeah.
What do I do?
You need revenue as soon as possible.
Our guest today is Lars Maehler, who is currently working for the largest publicly listed communication company globally. You can Google which one that is. And formerly worked as the general manager of First Page Digital, a digital marketing agency that just over the course of 5 years 12x their revenue, expanded the team from 19 to 86 people, and increased their number of active clients by 400%. Our topic today is how to turn your service into an actual business.
Next thing you know, like, you're basically reactive to clients that are shouting the loudest at you, and that's how you prioritize work. And then suddenly everything just seems to crumble, and that's where you hit things like burnout.
Today we are going to cover what most entrepreneurs get wrong about trying to build a business around their skill set, what metrics matter to prioritize at which stage of the business, how to tackle the challenges of scaling, how to balance growth and service quality.
Entrepreneurs having a really difficult time to let go of control over certain areas so they can enter into the phase of growth and scaling. How do you balance that?
We also talk about hiring, team building, and many more.
Someone who's currently building their small team, would you say it's more worthy to get people with less experience but cheaper, but they can train them, or to just pay a little bit more and get like one senior but is real experience that can help?
The majority of entrepreneurs will start with outsourcing, and I would never outsource anything that impacts.
So if you are planning or currently in the process of building a business around your skill set, this is a must-listen episode for you.
What's the investment that provides the highest ROI in the middle of scaling a business? What is it that you think that people overvalue in business, yet it's not that important?
Before we jump into the episode, please hit that subscribe button. That allows us to bring on other interesting guests as well in the future and continue the work that we do here. And now that you did that, let's jump into the episode.
So you have been working with service-based businesses, marketing agencies. I've worked with hundreds of clients, scaled agency together with your team to like what was like 2.3 million to like $16 million.
Yeah,
right?
It was quite a journey, but it took 5 years.
Yeah, it took 5 years, of course. Everything takes some time.
Yeah.
And actually, like, that's why I'm super excited to dive deeper into this conversation, because you and I, like, on and off having these kind of conversations for a number of years already on different kind of topics. And I always admire that how much of the details you retain of this journey of starting something and scaling it up from almost nothing to something more tangible.
Yeah.
And I do feel that there is so many people out there, including myself, and I think Max as well, who want to start a business, mainly focusing on service-based businesses, and it's not as easy as people may think. So I would like to kick this off just by asking, just based on your experience, what is it that you think most people get wrong when they want to start a service-based business that's built around their own skill set?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And I've had a number of conversations with a couple of aspiring entrepreneurs where, like, I think everyone here can relate to, like, like sitting in a corporate job kind of feels like a hamster wheel. It's very, very repetitive. And when certain decisions are made, sometimes you don't necessarily agree with them, and then like that level of like, animosity, I guess, like that level of animosity sometimes drives people to say like, look, I can do it better. I want it I want a certain level of independence, and I want to be my own boss. And like the irony with all of these things is that like there's pros and cons on both sides of the coin when it comes to like entrepreneurship as well as like corporate life. But when people jump into the realms of entrepreneurship, the biggest misconception is I'm going to be free and flexible, when in reality you become like, you will always have someone to report to, right? Like you will be responsible for taking care of your clients. You will be responsible especially if your business is based on your time investment. Like if you're not working, no money comes in, right? So there's a certain level of job, like financial security, that is often tied to your activity, and then you fall into this trap of like feeling like you're a slave to your own craft, right? So yeah, I think that would be the biggest misconception.
Totally relate.
Yeah, that's me, man.
Yeah, totally relate to
That's
that,
that's
obviously.
exactly my story. And
Yeah.
like they really sold us this entrepreneurship that, oh yeah, you need to start your own business, you are going to be free, but then you end up actually working even more. But in my humble opinion, I think it still feels more rewarding when I'm working for myself rather than like investing my prime years into someone else's business, especially if I don't gain that much out of that, meaning whether it's like financially being well compensated, great connections and great learnings, which is not the case most of the time. And yeah, that's why also like I always felt a very strong calling to do something
Yeah.
for myself.
Yeah, same. Like I find it more satisfying knowing that at least I sacrifice and become slave, but building my dreams instead of building someone else's and working equal hours. But that's definitely a misconception, because you end up working way more, and the flexibility sometimes you think it's there, but it isn't. Also, because like you need to report back to your clients, or you need to book the meetings at some point.
Yeah.
Although I still feel that at the end of the day, if shit hits the fan, you are burned out, you are sick, or it's completely necessary, it's a little bit more flexible to just report to your clients, say like, look guys, I need to take a week off, otherwise like I'm burned, I'm cooked,
Yeah.
than having a boss and easily just get a week off without any consequences.
Yeah, what if I told you could basically combine everything that you both just said in a corporate environment as well, right? Like, I mean, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. We work with companies that are in the process of basically scaling cross borders, which is really exciting because that's where scale really starts picking up. But entrepreneurship, or the willingness to jump into entrepreneurship, has a bunch of different motivations, right? They can be down to independence. That's often like one of the core ones, right? It could be like, I want to earn money for myself. Fair enough. But like when you're talking about things like, I want to innovate, I want to do things my way, I want to basically feel like I'm actually having an impact. Like, those things can actually be done within a corporate setting. There's just a way of going about it, and pushing for change in a way that fits like a more bureaucratic model. But the beauty of being in my position is that I get to roll out new capabilities and services within a really well-structured, publicly listed company and environment, but I don't carry any of the risk, right? So it's kind of an entrepreneurial division within a larger corporate setting where the expectations are around actually acting like an entrepreneurial establishment. So, yeah, it depends on what floats your boat, right?
Yeah, that's so true.
It
And
kind
like-
of feels like that's the middle ground then.
Yeah.
Because you still
Yeah.
have the security of a safe job, and you know that you are going to get paid at the end of the month.
Yeah.
And well, of course, it also depends whether the organization that you work at allows you to
Yeah.
be creative, push for change, implement those kind of innovative ideas.
Yeah.
So you just need to find the right company for that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in the privileged position of being able to work with a really great company or a really great boss, then something like burnout also can be addressed through a sabbatical, or basically just sharing that with your boss as well, right? And the you can either take unpaid leave or you can take a week off. Like, I mean, on average, like at least in Europe, you have like practically a month you can take off. That's a
true.
lot of time, right? Like. And if you need additional time, then of course you can take unpaid leave. But that's beyond the conversation, right? Like I think entrepreneurship, if you're really on the brink of like wanting to do your own thing, you need to be aware that at least from the get-go, depending on which stage you are in, it's going to take a lot more work than you anticipate.
Oh yeah, especially at the beginning stages, until at least you build some systems to either automate or make the work less time consuming for you, because you have repeated so many times, so you know your ways out. At the beginning stages, even simple tasks sometimes can take way longer than expected, at least in my experience on that.
It's not just about the task, but it's also that when you start your own business, let's say that you are trying to build something that's based on your skill set. Let's say that you are a fitness trainer or you work with people, coaching, whether it's marketing. You know your craft and you have the chance to dedicate most of your time to your craft so you can provide a better service, but you need to get people through the door to actually provide the service for.
Which is a different, whole different job.
Oh, that's a completely different job, and this is where I also see that so many first-time entrepreneurs struggle a lot, because suddenly they don't only have to provide the service and deliver the product, but they also need to think about cash flow, they need to think about marketing, they need to do sales, they need to do X, Y, Z that they don't even consider.
They need to be their own accountant, their own marketeer, their own social media manager, like especially coming from a fitness background, like you're a personal trainer on the gym floor. Okay, you still need to socialize, do some PR, get some clients through the door, but most of the times you just do it on the gym floor. Like you find the clients in there. And then when you want to launch an online business or scale, you don't realize how much more work is in there that is beyond your skill set. Creating content, understanding what content works and what not, have a content schedule, email marketing, social media marketing, then setting up the business, be responsible for your own financials, be your own accountant technically, if you're not in a position to hire people to do all these things for you. So it's like you need to build skill sets way beyond your initial ones. And talking about like this topic, like what's some of the most common mistakes that you see that new entrepreneurs or business owners do over and over again through your lenses?
Just like what you said, like you build a really great executional skill set, right? So like if I'm a personal trainer, for example, riding on that example, I'm really good at training and motivating individuals. So like when I go into that and I purely focus on executional components, what you often miss out are the fundamental ingredients that actually establish an ecosystem that keeps the man going to satisfy like the clientele, right? I think on an agency perspective, it's the same thing. Like if you're really good at paid media or you're really good at social media management, then by chance someone might get in touch with you and say like, hey, I would love for you to run my campaign. You run one campaign and you're like, wow, I can actually do this. But like just because you're running one campaign for a client doesn't mean you have a business, right? And I think a business for me is having a really, really acute understanding of 4 different things. Like when you're in the course of transitioning into entrepreneurship, right? Like I usually split it into like, what are the non-living components that I require to do my job, right? Like for example, a laptop, a gym, if I need to go to the gym, if a phone, like an internet connection, blah, blah, blah. It could be a table or whatever you want there. Then what are the what are the living skill sets, or what are the skill sets that I do not have that I need to bring to the table to satisfy like a business infrastructure? So if I'm really good at paid media, there's still account management, there's still business development, there's marketing, there's finance, there's accounting, there's legal, there's so many different things, right? And you will quickly find yourself feeling really overwhelmed if you're suddenly forced to become an expert across all. And like a lot of entrepreneurs have the distinct need of being perfectionist across every single category. And what that means is like you're suddenly looking at 7 to 8 different career paths that are necessary to run one successful business. It makes no sense, right? But then you're also not in a position where you could potentially hire somebody because maybe there's not enough revenue, right? But we'll get to that in a moment, right? And then the next stage is like, how do I differentiate? Because if I'm just like personal trainer A, B, C, D, E, and I line up like 10 different personal trainers, like why should I choose you over someone else, right? So same thing with an advertising agency. Like anyone these days has the resources in line to become like a pretty decent digital marketer. But the differentiation components really come down to not just your experience, but your ability to serve clients in a unique way, right? And really make sure that whatever a client is giving you financially can be complemented with value or perceived value that exceeds that financial amount, right? So you need to look at that. The last component is like promotional. Like, how do people actually find out about me? Where do my customer segments live?
Getting leads.
Like, getting leads, right? Like, the majority of us hate sales, right? Like, it's super uncomfortable, like, asking someone for money, let alone, like, approach someone that you've never met in your life and be like, hey, guess what I do? And, like, would you be interested in this service, right? But you need to, if you're not able to do sales yourself, there are ways where you can digitally at least build a funnel where, like, whoever comes to your doorstep is already qualified, so that conversation is easier, right? But again, that requires, like, the multidisciplinary capability component of, like, running your own marketing and everything else, right? So starting a business is really, really hard. And if you're just going to shoot from the hip and take it spontaneously, like, there's a reason when you look online why so many startups fail, right? And often, more than not, in my experience, it's either, like, product market fit issues, or just because, like, the skill sets weren't there, or a complete inability of, like, leadership when it comes to building an infrastructure, right? So, yeah, there's a lot more components you need to be aware of.
Do you know, like, Brian, what's his name? I think his name is Brian Belfort. He has this blog post about product market channel model fit. And it immediately makes it more complex than you think, like, I have a product and I just need to find a market.
Yeah.
Because you need to think about the model that you are using, the channels that you are using in order to put yourself out there and market the service and the product that you are selling.
Yeah.
So, as you said, out of a sudden, there's, like, a laundry list of things that I need to take care of. And all I wanted was just, I have this amazing service that I want to bring to the world and help people. And suddenly I need to do a million things.
Yeah.
And that's something that I have seen here as well for years. I met so many amazing, talented people who really want to make a difference. They have a great service, but they're really struggling to sell it, to market themselves, to position themselves. So what would you do? Like, what would you recommend them to do? Because they can do it, they can learn it, they can delegate it, they can just cancel it, they can automate it. So there's so many different ways how they could go about it, but it has to be done one way or another, or there is no customer to serve.
Yeah. I mean, look, everyone has an idea, right? But I think executing on that idea is a whole different dimension. So when it comes to actually establishing a business and positioning yourself, is that your question?
Yeah, so, like, where would you start?
Where would I start?
So let's say that I just want to start a business. I have this service that I'm going to provide, I don't know, breathwork sessions.
Yeah.
What do I do?
I think you need revenue as soon as possible. Like, you can't basically sit on an extinguished fire thinking you're going to prevail over months and months unless you have, like, enough of a runway from an investment perspective, right? Like, if you have if you have a runway of 6 to 7 months, yeah, you can do your due diligence and everything else. But realistically speaking, like, if you're really deciding to jump from whatever position you are in to, like, suddenly entrepreneurship, you need revenue, bar none, right? Because that's what keeps the business, or that's what keeps the flames going, right? And once you have your first client, you will learn a lot simply through trial and error, whether that's, like, coming up with a contract that wasn't specific enough and suddenly you're, like, overcommitting on XYZ and this client alone is basically becoming a full-time job in itself, or whether it's, like, not having certain capabilities that are required to basically deliver on a expectation, right? It's a very, very distinct learning period through trial and error that the more you do it, the more effective you're going to get, right? But long story short, without revenue, you don't have a business, nor do you have a start of a business. So that should be your main focus.
That's my business mentor used to say me this as well when a couple of years ago when we worked intensively with a guy. Like every time someone was asking a relevant question or something else about, like, scaling or about ideas or about building something, his question was always back to that, your revenue. Because if you don't have this, you don't have a business. So that's pretty much like the foundation of it.
You can.
So, you reminded me of his words.
Well, he seems like a great guy. I think we need to be a little bit more patient when it comes to like understanding the amount of work it actually requires to not only be an entrepreneur and like a solopreneur, but ultimately establishing a business infrastructure around yourself. And the way I see it is just kind of like, metaphorically speaking, you're starting off with a clean slate where it's just like a Lego platform that you start building bricks on, right? And the first level is always going to be like, okay, do I have something that customers are willing to pay for? Can I execute on this service? And if that's yes, does it drive results? And are my clients staying? Because if you're suddenly winning hundreds of clients, but they all quit like a day later, then you're not meeting expectations, right?
Yeah.
But that's like the initial cycle. Then what you quickly find yourself running into is that you will have capacity constraints. Suddenly you have more clients than you can deal with, or a client giving you more work than you can actually handle. And what that means is you become your own bottleneck towards growth from a revenue perspective, right? And when that actually happens, that's when you're at, in my opinion, the most exciting moment of like an entrepreneur's journey, which is like, I need help, right?
And you need to hire someone.
Yeah.
And I need more me.
I mean, you can't clone yourself, but then fundamentally it's just like, okay, I need to hire somebody, but then the majority of people don't know, like, okay, how do I even approach a hiring process, right? Like, let's be real, like, okay, based on your strengths, like, have you actually reflected and understand your weaknesses, and which weaknesses can be complemented through an additional hire that actually adds value to the business financially? Because every single decision you make, at least in the beginning, needs to be financially justified, right? Because if you're just like, okay, screw it, I had like one client who just gave me a huge batch of like cash, I'm gonna hire like 6-7 people. Next thing you know, the client project ends and you're just like, I need to let go of all of these guys again. And that's not a sustainable business either, right?
I've seen that happening in the crypto space, big time.
Yeah.
2022. Luna crashes, FTX crashes, boom, done. Everything just vanished.
Yeah.
And then agencies that I was working with, they were massively scaling their operations and they were hiring all these people, and suddenly there was no more client coming through the door.
Yeah. Yeah. See, so like I am a massive fan of building businesses sustainably, right? So that means I always walk the fine line between capacity constraints and revenue, right?
Yeah.
And if I basically get to a point where I know I'm foregoing revenue because we don't have enough capacity to actually deliver on that revenue, then I make the decision that a headcount is necessary, right? If you see that there's a humongous influx in demand, then of course you can front load and prepare for it, but the contract should be on the table, or at least like closer to the end of discussion, right? So I think we're kind of transitioning to our next topic, which would be like, okay, let's say I'm in a position where I now have 5-6 clients. I'm working weekends now, which is something I never wanted to do because I want my freedom. What do I do now? Like, I can't physically handle more clients, right? So
that's a good scenario to be in it, right? That's already a good problem.
It's a really good problem, but it's also a problem that can completely destroy a business if you don't deal with that problem properly, right? Because there's some people that are just like, okay, screw it, I'm just gonna figure it out. And like, you still continue selling, you bring on more clients, and then next thing you know, like, you're basically reactive to clients that are shouting the loudest at you, and that's how you prioritize work. And then suddenly everything just seems to crumble, and that's where you hit things like burnout, because you've overcommitted. And then if you have contracts in place, then you're in trouble because you're also legally viable, right?
Oh yeah, that was my life at some point.
Yeah, I also did this mistake.
Yeah.
And I saw the decline as well, because there was a period that I had more clients I could handle,
Yeah.
And probably that was the right time to hire someone.
Yeah.
Because like there's been more than enough revenue to hire even more than one person, but I chose not to. And then I kind of fucked it up in terms of like, it's been way too much work, so I had to let go of some work, and I let go of the work I shouldn't have let go, which was the promotion work.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the cycle just went off at some point, so some clients gone, then the focus was not there, and then life happens, so that cost me like 6 months of scaling, if not more.
Yeah, I mean, we live and we learn, and some mistakes we make are more expensive than others, right? But
true.
Let's say, okay, now that we're at the point where we know that I no longer have capacity as an individual, like I need to hire somebody, right? So this is where, prior to actually making that hire, you need to be acutely aware of your strengths and weaknesses, and you need to understand like what are the most time-consuming elements of your actual day-to-day operations, right? So this is where I usually strongly recommend someone to list out in the most granular detail possible all of the services, the inclusions of each service, and what is the time to deliver on those different components, right? And then that's step one. Step two is some of these deliverables within the scope are going to be highly personalized to me, right? Like I am the unique differentiator as to why clients want to work with me. So if you delegate that, then your clients will get pissed off because they're paying for you.
Yeah.
Right? So you want to maintain those, but then there's also going to be a lot of administrative mumbo jumbo or templated things like, let's say, reporting or let's say accounting or any of those things that take up a lot of your time but don't necessarily add value to the business. So here you need to have a distinct understanding of like, okay, where do I focus my energy that actually drives revenue or cuts costs? And what are other things that are basically just soaking up time without any positive impact to the business, at least from a quantifiable perspective, right? And then the third thing, this is something that I think is really helpful, is I basically calculate my hourly rate, which means like if I make X amount of revenue in a month, I divide that by the amount of hours I work on a daily basis. And then the fourth step is all of the tasks that I isolated towards being repetitive or not really adding value to business, I take my hourly rates and I see like, okay, let's start off with a freelancer engagements and what are the hourly rates there? Like if I'm making savings by delegating those tasks out, then I think I'm actually winning, right? Because then I have more time that I can allocate towards revenue driving activities, right? And that's the cycle you need to continuously review. It's not just in the very beginning. It's like, it doesn't matter if you have a business with 10 people, then you basically just look at it from a more macro perspective, right? And in this way, you're consistently like really aware of at least your infrastructure and your cost centers and your revenue centers, right? Because business, purely from a KPI perspective, is not only about revenue, it's about margin, right? And people basically religiously just focus on revenue and often kind of lose track on costs, whether it's variable or fixed. And what they, like, if I'm making $100 and I have costs that are up to $99 US, I'm making $1 per conversion. Like, who cares, right? Like, I don't care that you're making $100 anymore. But if suddenly your margins are, at least within the marketing space, between 30 to 50%, that would be ridiculously good, right? Just to give you an idea, like some of the biggest public companies, margin-wise, operate at like a 11 to 14% margin rate.
So if you have higher than that, you're already like winning a lot.
I think as an entrepreneur, if you're not running at margins in excess of at least 30 to 40%, then like you should really review your cost structure. Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think that's a very important topic to mention, because you said that so many people obsess over the revenue, but I can spend, let's say, like $10 to acquire a client, and they are going to pay me $10. So I kind of like figured out a way how to turn $10 into nothing. right?
Yeah.
So this is where I think we need to obsess over the LTV to CAC ratio. At least that's the metric that I usually look at. Like, what's the lifetime value of the customer and how much money I actually spent on acquiring that. And this is what's going to give that ratio. That's going to be the indicator whether I am making money and I'm moving in the right direction or not. Or is there any other metric that you would obsess over?
Time spent on things is something like, let's say if you have a really good like margin structure and a very clear understanding of your cost and revenue splits, I think the next thing you need to really look into is more efficiency, right?
Yeah.
So efficiency meaning like, how long does it take to actually do a task? Is there a way to expedite this where I can save money? Now with AI, and like you said in the very beginning, automation is a great opportunity, but like you need to also basically make sure that you're not just buying tech for the sake of tech, right? Because
But you need it actually. You just
that
pay.
you actually need it,
Yeah.
right? And when the team grows, that the team is actually using it. Because
Yeah.
think about like, I mean, I've spoken to really great CMOs at larger companies, and what I think they do really effectively is like they review their tech stack almost on a quarterly basis, right? And they basically look at it from a usage rate. So
To realize which one they need to let go and which one to add more or just
well,
keep.
the consideration there is very simple. Like if you acquire something or you're paying for something, then you should be getting a use out of it.
Yeah.
And if you're not getting a use out of it, then there's two decisions. One, I discontinue it. That's the easy one. Or two, is there actually value in utilizing this effectively, and do I need to just be disciplined myself or retrain individuals within my inner circle or smaller company to use this tool effectively, right? But I wouldn't actually make drastic decisions until I have data to prove that A, this tool isn't really driving value for me, or B, like it's really just a cost center without benefit.
Yeah, we're talking about all these metrics, and I'm pretty sure there are going to be some entrepreneurs or especially solopreneurs out there that may have this question that also popped in my head of like, that's all cool, and reviewing the systems, hiring people, scaling, and I bet most people want to get to that point. But what advice would you give to someone who wants to get to that point but is not yet? And to make it very clear, the question is like, what if someone's business has stuck on the same like margin profit or revenue for like, let's say half a year from now, like a few months?
Yeah.
What should they look on, either on their metrics or either on whatever it is there, on your knowledge or advice? What should they look on to scale so they can get to a point that they can hire people or they can automate things?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on ultimate. You would have to start with why did you, like, I would first ask the question, like, why did you become an entrepreneur in the first place?
Yeah.
Because if you're all about, like, owning your own time and independence, then scaling the business through additional headcounts is just going to lead to stress because, like, you have to then manage people, right? So if, like, scaling can basically come down to the tech you acquire that enables you to do more with less, increasing overall headcounts, looking into new capabilities that these new headcounts can basically focus on, or last but not least, you just review your pricing model, right? So if you're basically stuck in your cycle, your customers are the best source of information. So basically telling them, do you think you're getting value for money? And like I've had clients, and I make this mistake sometimes where we basically, a client comes to me with a request that we've never done, so like I conservatively price it because like I think there's mutual risk. Like A, we've never done it before, so I want to deliver the service effectively, and B, I don't want to overcharge them on something because like we might run into some issues down the road, right?
Shouldn't it be the other way around, actually? that you actually make sure that you have enough resources that you can deploy in order to deliver it?
I have the resources. I'm just talking about pricing now, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, we actually did manage to completely over-deliver, and like I knew based on the time we invested into it, like I completely undercharged, and like I had a conversation with my client about this, and I was just like, look, you know you got a good deal on this, and she's like, yeah, I would have easily paid like 3 times more, right? So I know now, if I ever repeat what we've done for this client specifically, that my pricing was off and I can increase it because the value that we deliver is there, right? So I wouldn't have known that if I didn't have a good relationship with them, right? So same thing, if I'm with a personal trainer that also does nutrition guidance or helps you with like your sleep cycles or basically gives you like emotional support throughout the day with WhatsApp, like, and your remit is only like to train 1 hour a day in the gym or something, like clearly your
value is way more.
value is way higher, right?
Yeah.
And that's the one thing I get really upset about sometimes, is just like some individuals, like they don't see their own value, right? Because it's uncomfortable to approach a client who's been paying you at X amount that you know you're working hard for, and then saying like, look, I had a review internally in terms of like my effort invested into this relationship, and right now, because there's more demand around what I do, like we do need to talk about pricing adjustments, right? Are you still interested in continuing with me? Like that's a really uncomfortable conversation, right?
It is uncomfortable, but sometimes it's necessary.
Oh,
because
yeah.
that can be the reason you're kind of stuck.
Yeah, I mean, you need to be sure that you're delivering more value,
Yeah.
though, right? Because if you approach a client and you're just like, hey, like we're going to adjust the pricing, they're going to be like, no, see you later,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So
Or at least add something extra.
do the due diligence first. Yeah, but adding
Yeah.
things extra means more time, right? Which is something you're trying to resolve. So you would be kind of committing to falling into another trap. Even
What if their time is not that hard yet? Let's say that we have a model of an entrepreneur that so far the time consuming for the things they're dealing with, it's okay. They still invest a lot of time because, again, running your whole business is not like an easy thing. But they still are kind of stuck on scaling. Are there any areas that you would suggest them to look out first as to why they're stuck, to help them like unstuck and increase a little bit the revenue stream and then potentially scale?
find out where your bottlenecks are. That's it, right? Like really understand, like, is it a pure time bottleneck? Is it a capability bottleneck? Is it the inability to do X, Y, Z? Like ultimately it comes down to restraints, right? And in my opinion, I mean, when I scale a business, scale to me doesn't just purely mean revenue. Like in order to amplify revenue, like you need to have a larger base, right? A base of basically a team. And the beauty of basically having a team and going from like 5 to 20 to 40 to 80, like it enables you to do so many more things as the business grows. Don't get me wrong; it gets a lot more complicated and complex as you grow. But at the end of the day, like when it comes to maintaining your competitive advantage, as well as looking into reducing the reliance that you have yourself within a business, like you need to have infrastructure, processes, and a team in place, right? And that's truly where entrepreneurship leads to freedom, is when you have the infrastructure in place and where you can go on a holiday knowing that there's people within the business and like really good processes in place.
That's the dream.
Yeah.
When you can go on holiday and you know that the systems and the people you hire, they can continue even without you there, at least for a bit.
Exactly. So in my opinion, like if you want that freedom as an entrepreneur, like you need a team. Yeah.
Yeah, they say that if you want to go fast, you run alone. If you want to go far, you walk with other people. I just want to go back to something that you mentioned, which is also very relevant. What we are discussing right now is that you said that in many cases, people's own perfectionism is the one that kind of like steps in the way. And I've been thinking about that since you said that, because it kind of directly correlates to how you balance growth and quality. Because like knowing myself as well, and I also what I have seen before, entrepreneurs having a really difficult time to let go of control over certain areas so they can enter into the phase of growth and scaling. How do you balance that? Like, is there like any kind of framework or suggestion that you would say to people when they face this issue?
Well, I think you're always going to be your own worst critic, right? And that can be quite hampering. Like if again, like you do digital marketing every single day, or you're a personal trainer on a daily basis, and you speak to someone that is new to fitness or someone that's new to marketing, like they're not going to see those like different variables of you having said something in a certain way, right? I think there's like the fallacy that like the more you know, the less you think you know, and then when you're in the very beginning of learning something, after like 3 hours, you think you're an expert, right? So I think perfectionism can be crippling, especially when you need to move fast. And it's not about lowering your standards, it's understanding that there is a version 1.0 that you can bring to market that is acceptable to the client on the basis that they're actually paying for it, right? Like, that's the beauty of demand, supply, and the economy in general. Like, an investment in you is ultimately about in confidence in your ability to deliver, right? So that's probably the way I would skew it. In terms of like scaling and perfectionism, like when you have teammates and you're a perfectionist, the biggest issue that I always see is like micromanagement. Like there's no tomorrow, right? Because micromanagement insinuates that you don't have trust in whoever is working with you to deliver it up to your standards. And this often happens because when you're in a startup, rather than hiring someone that is experienced because they're expensive, you go with someone that is like really inexpensive, but then also doesn't have the experience, right? And then you're in this cycle of actually not being able to run your business because you're busy trying to manage and train someone who, once they have the skill sets, are at liberty to leave, right? So I think there's so many entrepreneurs I know, they put their heart and soul into training this individual to the point of where the individual goes like, okay, cool, peace. Right.
Oh, wow.
It happened to me as well before, and that was so painful.
Yeah.
Because we hired someone in Jakarta, and I invested so much in this girl, and then from one day to another, she decided not to show up anymore.
But why? Did she become overwhelmed?
I still
or?
don't know. We don't know.
Yeah.
She just vanished, and she did something else, right?
Oh, wow.
I mean, you need to always be aware that like the moment someone believes their skill set exceeds what they're actually receiving from a salary perspective, and they get that validation by speaking to an alternative employer who proves that validation, of course they're going to leave, right? That's on the assumption of pure salary orientation, which when we started in our careers, that's obviously the main focus, right? But you need to look into also things that maintain people within a business. It's like the ability to grow, the influence that they have within the decision-making frameworks that the business offers, like being a part of actually building the business and steering the ship, like having a voice, feeling safe, and being able to experiment, right? Like I think we need to be very conscious that when we hire someone, we don't just want them to execute, they genuinely become part of like a greater mission. And if you don't really believe that, then like you're going to have difficulties maintaining your motivation if you don't think your business is striving towards actually having a genuine impact.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, I think look at alternative angles when it comes to maintaining people and the importance of culture. It's not just about salary.
So that's when we are ready to hire people.
Yeah.
But there's also another alternative when we can start outsourcing stuff. So for example, if I don't want to carry the risk of having someone on a payroll that I have to pay even when there is nothing coming in, that was also my way of mitigating the risk. Plus there was like no long-term commitment, and I also didn't feel the pressure that I'm responsible for this person's livelihood and, you know, make that money because they have a family to feed and so on. So another option is to outsource, right? So what are the different things that you would consider outsourcing if, let's say, if someone wants to free up some time and energy for them to focus on, let's say, service delivery or quality, but there are some additional things that needs to be taken care of? What are the things that you would consider outsourcing? What is it that you would never outsource? And if you would outsource something, like, what would be the right point in time when we should consider outsourcing?
I mean, when you basically transition from like wanting to move from solopreneurship and you want to build an ecosystem around you, the majority of entrepreneurs will start with outsourcing, right? And then they outsource, and I would never outsource anything that impacts client relationship. So think of it this way, like if it requires communication with client, that needs to basically be maintained internally. Done and dusted.
So here we talk about even before they become a client, we also talk about the client as like in the lead stage as well, like in terms of marketing.
Even in the lead stages,
Yeah.
because like the first interaction a customer has from you, that is your brand, right? So like if you're delegating it to somebody who, like you said in the very beginning, doesn't really have skin in the game, they're indifferent. They're working for a salary. Like if you have people that are a part of the business, they understand the culture, they believe in the culture, like they're able to translate that really, really well in day-to-day conversations, right? So delegate repetitive tasks that don't necessarily require a lot of customization. So this is, for example, if you have a dashboard or a reporting template in a marketing agency. This is when it comes to activities like accounting. This comes to activities such as, I don't know, even like, see, like the tricky thing about this question is it's very contextual, right? Like depending on which business you ultimately run, there is going to be decisions around outsourcing and maintaining. So simply put, in an agency environment, maintain everything that has a direct touch point with clients, delegate anything that is repetitive, that doesn't have a lot of like inconsistencies. So you know the deliverable that's coming back doesn't, like, it's time consuming, but it's not going to break.
So you're against the model that I see a lot of even agencies use, or like people who like serve services as to help you scale, grow business, or even fitness they use. Like I've seen in many this kind of like businesses that they do, that they outsource, even though as a personal brand, they outsource the sales system. So the people who chat with you through their profile or their company's profile, it's not the actual person, but it's a sales rep. And sometimes they even advise you to book a sales call with them or an intro call or whatever they call it. And then instead of you expecting sometimes to meet the actual person, but you meet one of their team members.
Yeah, and how do you think that makes customers feel?
Definitely
Not appreciated, not taken seriously.
But at the same time, when they're already scaled enough, is it something you would advise against, I guess, right?
Well, that would be, if you have a personal brand, then of course, like, again, if you're basically answering every single customer inquiry, you're going to eventually get stuck. But
Yeah.
let's say if you're running a business, you can train other salespeople on how you would like them to engage with clients, how to qualify, like how to ensure that there's a genuine approach around having an interest. Like that actually comes down to just really good hiring, right? So if you're outsourcing, that's one story, but eventually you'll get to a point where the hours that someone you're outsourcing to, and they usually charge a premium sometimes, right? Getting a full-time hire will actually be a cheaper solution, and the positive thing with that is that you can basically ensure that it's in alignment with there's more control in your brand, right?
Oh, that's what I meant. Not exactly outsourcing in terms of like in Adam's question, like to another freelancer. I even meant like us to hire someone in your team to do this sales part or the chatting part. That sometimes is just repetitive. I'm not talking for very specific cases, like some very genuine concern and difficult question that the client might have, but some of this kind of a tedious tasks, like for example in a fitness business is the weekly check-in, that is just like sending a form, checking that everything is going well, or when someone inquires you to just qualify if it's a good lead or not, like some of these kind of things. And probably not outsourcing it, but having as like an assistant in your team. Train this person well, give them like different like scripts and scenarios as to how to respond and what to do, and then also teach them some of the fundamentals so they know how to understand and what's people want about in the agency business, the marketing business, the fitness business, so they have a voice on themselves. That's what I mean. Would this be something, would you advise someone to get as like a PA or not in this case?
I mean, if the value of what you could be doing exceeds that which a PA could do, then yeah, you would basically get someone like that in, right? I think something that's really important is when you're initially hiring individuals to join your team, any team that is like less than 6 people, the people that you hire are not just going to do like one thing.
They're going to do multiple.
Yeah,
probably.
Everyone's going to be utilizing multiple hats. So like in the very beginning, especially because I mean, I literally just went through this, right? Like we built a new SEO division last year in May. It's like roughly 1.5 years.
That's
old
perfect question
now.
then.
Yeah. Right. So like we basically started, I ended up hiring someone extremely senior to join the division because like I need additional support. I need more ideas to basically support me in building the infrastructure of the business. The third hire was more senior as well, right? Was more of an SEO tech. The fourth hire was a content writer where I could take the risk and go a little bit more junior. But then personality is so important, right? So this is where I look for individuals that actually get excited by wanting to do more things or learning to do more things. Where like
passionate about their job.
Exactly, right? So like if you suddenly have like a really great core group of people that actually genuinely like what they do, or they're really excited and consistently curious, then like everyone is actually super gung-ho about getting involved, right? Like our content writer, who's an amazing lady, like she's also like a really strong presenter. So like I take her with us for like client performance reports, and she loves like talking about stuff that isn't content writing, right? And actually walk the client through performance. So yeah, I know it's a longer story, but in the example of your PA, like let's say the PA that books appointments for this personal trainer, that same PA could basically also help you with like creating assets for distribution, whether it's for your personal brand or
emails,
whether that's for, running an EDM thing. Maybe she has a really keen interest in fitness, right? So you could sit down with her and teach her about fitness, and then basically say like, look, we're going to build up a mailing list. Like you are responsible for basically circulating a educational newsletter once every 2 weeks. And like, why don't you bring your recommended topics to me? So you're starting to empower individuals to actually pursue their interests. And like, she's going to learn so much rather than just like picking up the phone and doing appointments, right? Like
you mentioned it before, so let's go back to this in this scenario case of hiring, like not outsourcing in a freelance, but hiring someone on your team. So I agree with you that I would rather get someone with a little bit less experience but more passionate about what they do than getting that a bit more experienced person, but you see that the spark is not there anymore. If I understand it correct, is what you said as well, right?
It comes down to the complexity of the business, right?
For
so
some
like,
roles.
Yeah.
But for someone who's currently building their small team, starting from hiring 1 or 2 people only, what would you advise as to, is it more worthy? Let's say they do have like a revenue cap as to how much they can invest into their team. Would you say it's more worthy to get people with less experience but cheaper, but they can train them to hire them as part of the team, or to just pay a little bit more and get like one senior that is really experienced that can help them with this, and then wait a little bit and then hire the second one and the third one? Like, is it worth to make their budget more tight to go for experience, or just get a newbie, train it well,
Depends on the nature of the business and the complexity, right? Like when you're basically building out an agency, it would be like you want someone that's a little bit highly experienced. But if you're super confident in your own abilities as a personal trainer and you have like this wealth of knowledge across all of these different facets that impact health, then you can afford to go more junior because you can teach them a lot, right? But if you're basically in a digital marketing agency environment where you're really looking to like quickly build up revenue, when you have 5 or 6 clients, like these juniors are going to get overwhelmed, right? Like it doesn't matter how much you teach them because there's also an experiential factor in having, let's say, agency experience, right? And I think having someone that's a little bit more senior, the benefit associated to that early is that they should be bringing new ideas to the table as well. So they improve your business beyond what you're picturing versus a junior doesn't have any point of reference or benchmark. So like they will learn everything from you.
So
right?
they just obey, they just go. Because they don't have to bring. They should just like, yeah, give me what I have to do and I'll do it.
In the very beginning, yes. It's very rare to find somebody that's like fresh out of university that comes to you like within 2 weeks and is like, hey, I noticed something, we're doing it this way, let's do it this way, right? Like if you find someone, hold on to them, right?
Yeah.
Like that is a diamond in the rough. But the vast majority don't have the confidence to basically come up to you, especially if you're like the person that presents themselves as the all-knowing, right? I think that could be really intimidating for someone.
And what are the ways that you could reward your team to make them like feel more like part of the process? Like could be like bonus on the performance, could be promise on scaling as the business scales, could what's some of the things either on or beyond money that you would advise someone to use as a reward for their team to make them more like feel part of the business?
I mean, for myself, as we're building this new division, like every single person in my team knows they can basically highlight their opinions in reference to anything we do.
Be heard.
And they are heard, right? So they're actually part of building this out. The second thing is they know I'm insanely ambitious. Like I've built a business with like 80 plus people before and like we're 6 now and I promise you we will get there again.
Yeah.
Right? And like if you fight these like more turbulent, chaotic sometimes times with me, then like I will promise you growth in your own careers as well. And I've delivered on this promise, right? Like the ones that have already, I mean, we haven't really lost anyone in the team. Everyone since the beginning is still around, and it's only 1.5 years. But every single one of them where I made commitments, I kept those commitments. And it's really important to be consistent with what you promise and what you actually deliver. And I told them, like in the very beginning when it was like 2 to 3 clients, like sometimes we would be sitting at the desk and they were just like, Lars, what do we do? And I said like treat this like a luxury. You will never be this free ever in your life again. As long as you're in this team. And like I tell them every single month when we're going through the numbers together, like this is where we're going to be like in X amount of time, and we delivered on that as well, right? So if your team can see that you're delivering on basically everything you're saying, and they see the growth and the bonuses of, it doesn't necessarily need a bonus, but the increments in salary or the increments in responsibility are basically delivered on as well. Like it gets to a point where once you've done that like enough times in a row, what you say goes and that's it, right? And we gotten to that point, at least with the division that I'm working with.
That's great. Yeah.
Based on your experience, like what's the investment that provides the highest ROI in the middle of scaling a business? So here we can talk about recruitment, investing in team, investing in marketing.
If you're good at sales, then you don't need to basically invest into marketing that heavily, right? So it depends on the team dynamics, but I think the best return on your investment early is going to be coming from the correct hires, right? So again, within our really small group, like I'm the sales guy, and I have experience in running the overall operation. Then I have like the SEO director, who's a massive, like he's the mad scientist, right? Like he's been doing SEO since like the early 2000s. He's incredibly passionate, and like he experiments and lives on different forums like on a daily basis. So he's the one that brings new inspiration and ideas to the table. Then he like then we have like the SEO tech, and he's like super structured, like the most like process orientated individual you will ever meet in your life, right? And then we have our content writer, who is like right in the middle between like really positive and optimistic and bringing that energy to the team, whilst also like being insanely good at client management, right? So, and all of these people together complement each other so well that like now I can afford to take 2 weeks off in Bali because I know like the business is safe, right? So I wouldn't be able to achieve what I have achieved without the members of my team. So hands down, good hiring decisions and investment.
Would there be something else in case somebody is not ready to hire yet? So let's say that somebody is still at the stage that, okay, I don't feel comfortable, I don't have the resources to hire someone. Like, what would be the answer to the exact same question?
Like your most important investments outside of additional headcounts.
Yes.
Right? Okay, well, do you have enough business?
Let's say that we do.
Okay. What is your capacity like?
In terms of?
Like
how many clients I can serve, or?
Yeah, how many, like, do you feel like you're over 80% of your capacity right now?
Definitely.
Okay, well, the best investment you need to make is, again, are we talking about an agency here?
It can be agency, it can be anything like service oriented.
Well, then review your process. Then that's more of a time investment rather than a financial investment, right? Because even if you like invest into more platforms and everything else, and you're by yourself in a business, it's not going to make a drastic difference, right? So really, this is why I said in the very beginning, like list out every single scope deliverable within your service, like menu, so to speak. Because if you have a really good idea on that, you can basically jump into every single one of these and see, how am I doing it now? If I really challenge myself and I'm just honest with myself, can I do it better? If I did it better, what would that mean from an outcome perspective? Less time, less cost, more money? Like that, there's really just these three variables, and you go through every single line item like that and really think deeply, right? And then like you just tweak it as you go. But again, if you're at 80% capacity, you should basically look into how you could get more help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that answer, and that's what I also noted down here for myself, that focusing on processes and optimizing systems and so on.
Yeah.
Ever since I started doing that, I have a separate blog every single week when I take a look at the things that I do and try to improve that. And even if you just improve it incrementally by like 1% every single week, out of a sudden, what started out as like a 12-hour work at the very beginning, when let's say I started joining events, and then I can do the exact same thing in half an hour now, because I figured out the process, I figured out the tool, I know exactly what I need to do, and then out of a sudden I just saved 11 hours for myself, right? I would like to repeat the same question. What would be the advice to someone who is not in that fortunate position yet, that they are at full capacity, they are still at the stage of trying to lock in more revenue? And the reason why I'm asking is because I've seen this happening as well, and I made this mistake as well, that I wanted to make money, and instead of focusing on like having more calls or reaching out more, I was optimizing the processes, and that was not the right lever to pull, right? So what would be your
I did exactly
advice?
the same on my first year. I was focusing way too much time on optimizing processes, building system behind, building better service, but you just realize that, wait,
for
who
something,
are you building the service for, man? You don't have enough.
You were optimizing something for something that doesn't even work.
You also mentioned at the beginning that some people, they just spend way too much time on the perfection,
Yeah.
to perfect their service, but it's better to deliver a version 1.0 service
Yeah.
and get some revenue, because if you don't have a revenue, you do not have a business. Even if you have a beautiful product or service, you need the revenue in.
Well, I think we focus on things that might not be the best for the business, but the things that we're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the problem. Like,
True.
you're both highly analytical, looking into processes can basically be a lot more rewarding than having to door knock and be rejected 200 times, right? And sales sucks in the very beginning if you don't have any experience. Oh, it's horrible, right? Like, I mean, I've had people shout at me. Like, I've dealt with rejection really badly in the very beginning because I took it personal, right? And these days, I think if you change your mind state to simply like, look, sales is really just educating someone about what you do, and if there is a need around that, then the interaction and the connection happens naturally, right? And you're not going to sell someone something they don't need. And even if you do that successfully, like, the relationship is not going to be a positive one, because like there's going to be an aha moment where the person you sold is going to realize, hey, there's no value here. And like you basically ripped me off, right? So longevity of a business is all about genuine willingness to help someone else, and not necessarily purely financially opportunistic. There needs to be a balance.
And also on top of that, what helped me in my first months when I started my business is that I realized that the sales process basically is qualifying if we are compatible to work together. Like, if I am the right trainer for you, and if this client is the right person for me, because you also don't want to train anyone, you also have a specific avatar. So it's like changing the perspective of like, I'm not trying to sell or take their money. I'm trying to see if my service, if my product is a good match with your needs.
Yeah.
And that just solves
That's
it
why
completely.
like every single qualification call should start with like, hey, let's see if there's a relevant way of working together, and if there isn't, I'll point you to somewhere else.
Yeah. So back to Adam's question though, not for someone who has an issue with getting rejected or sales, but still is not in this privileged position and trying to climb there. What was the question?
So the question was like, what would be the highest ROI investment in case you are not in the position yet?
Sales.
Yeah.
Sales.
It's very simple, right? Double down on sales. If you're really like not comfortable with sales, get comfortable. I promise you, after 150 rejections, you won't even feel it anymore.
Oh yeah.
Right? And then, I mean, that's version one. And if you really can't push yourself for that, then like at least like review how you can generate leads, right? Write content that is educational and that actually informs your potential customer base. Have a website. Within that website, have enough call to actions that actually lead to conversions, and then look into different ways of promoting that website, whether that's through socials, whether that's through running ads, like, and build an ecosystem around that. But that also can be very costly, right? So every time a person clicks on an ad, that's going to cost you money. That doesn't necessarily lead to a conversion. There's an average of 6 to 9 interactions prior to a conversion, especially if the basket price you're asking for is higher, right? So getting a return on investment, especially in industries that aren't necessarily like I believe everyone has a distinct understanding of what a personal trainer is. It's getting to the point where the majority of people also know what is a social media agency. So if you're in a highly competitive business, like, the return on investment for ads is really, really difficult to obtain, right? So this is why I like sales, because the only thing that it costs me is my ego and my time.
Yeah.
And a lot of times for this kind of services, it's better to, in our days, maybe that conversation would be different a few years earlier, but in today's day, I think the organic reach is getting up to a point that maybe in some service-based businesses is better than ads sometimes. Or at least then you run the ads targeted on your audience, because then there are people that are already familiar with you and not complete strangers.
I mean, this is why I'm a massive believer in just building up your CRM, right? So
Yeah.
like there's basically the foot in the door technique, which basically means like you're asking for like a smaller favor, which is like super easy, like subscribe, or like, hey, can you pass me a pen? And then you ask for the phone number or something, right? So I think through just smaller asks through your website, where it's just like, hey, click on this ad, read this article, like if you're interested, like read this article, or like subscribe if you want to have a personalized like meal plan,
freebie.
to your,
Any
a
freebie.
freebie, right?
Yeah.
So I think I I think the nurturing funnel is actually where you're going to have a lot more success when you own your own CRM outside of social, right? So if you have social, let's say if you have 5 to 10,000 followers on social versus like a mailing list of 30,000 people, it's super easy for anyone to click subscribe rather than like essentially get a follow for,
Yeah.
despite the fact it's the same action, right? Like it's weird.
That's true.
Just to go back to what you have to do depending on which situation you are in. What I have been using is something that I heard from, I think, Chris Williamson on his podcast, is that the magic you are looking for is behind the task that you have been avoiding. And somehow you
Definitely.
always know what you need to do, but you find a way how not to do
procrastinate.
it. Right?
Yeah.
And most of the time you know that the answer that I need to talk to more people, because I don't know enough about the
Yeah.
problem solution space. But I don't know, I don't feel comfortable. So, okay, let me improve the design on this
Yeah.
instead.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So whenever I feel that I'm a bit stuck, like, okay, what is the thing that I have been avoiding, but I know that it has to be done?
Yeah.
And the moment I realize that, that's it. That's what I have to do. I don't have any other job today than tackle that one thing, and I'm not doing anything else.
Yeah, I mean,
Truth words.
there's that you can reward yourself in different ways for difficult tasks, right? I don't know. There's many tricks, but like it's very much real with what you said. Like you either continue avoiding what needs to be done, and then you will feel the ramifications of that down the road, or you just grind your teeth, do it once, and realize it wasn't actually that bad.
Yeah, and most of the time it's all about gaining clarity, because you don't know what's on the other side of that door once you open it. That, okay, I'm going to call this guy and I'm going to learn something. You're like, oh, this is something that I haven't even thought about, that actually helps me to better understand what I need to do next.
Yeah.
And that's the same with difficult conversation with people. That's the same with getting rejected a million times on sales calls, right?
Yeah.
It's all about refining what you are working on until you have clarity.
Yeah. I actually, before I forget, I wanted to share this story because I found it being relevant as well, right? But I had a colleague who also like despised sales, right? So he actually became one of the strongest salespeople in my division, and the way he did that is he started building reciprocal partnerships instead. Right, so like if you are a personal trainer, it makes sense to speak to every single nutritionist in the space, or even talk to like healthy restaurants and see like, look, is there a way I can basically leave my number here or something, right? The other component could also be like, if I'm a personal trainer, I should be partnering with physiotherapists, because anyone going to a physiotherapist might have a previous sports injury that you can train them through more effectively, or they fucked themselves up in the gym so badly that you need to help them out anyway, right?
And it's also a win-win situation, because some of your clients might need a physio.
Yeah,
So
right.
you
So
can also
imagine like
offer.
if you don't want to do like 20 calls to like strangers that you want to recruit basically to be your clients, then you can look into 5 nutritionists, like 10 different physiotherapists and everything else, and then it comes together, right?
Yeah, it reminds me to my case as well, that I go to the gym, Max destroys me, come home, and then we had this friend of ours, Mateus, who is a physiotherapist. He was fixing me, so I can go back and destroy myself again.
So there you go. There you go. So like there's and the same thing is like with marketing or any sort of vertical you're in, there's always going to be symbiotic relationships. With marketing, it's PR. they develop content. That content needs visibility, right? That's one. Then there's like, okay, if you're an SEO agency, then maybe you can partner with an SEM or Google Ads agency. If you're a social agency, you can partner with a graphic design or a UX UI company, right? Like there's, look at relationships that can help you amplify your voice, because if you're basically writing or calling someone, you're isolating a potential sale to just, again, your own investment. Like, I always try to find ways to amplify our messaging through as many channels as possible. And it doesn't necessarily need to be like running ads, right? Like, I don't run ads for our agency. Like, I basically run a lot of training sessions where there's no expectations on outcomes. I look into partnerships like I just previously mentioned when it comes to other agencies where we have capabilities that they don't have. And like that alone has generated a lot of demand and reciprocal benefits, right? So you can avoid sales by just being friends with the right people.
Networking and partner up.
Yeah.
But what it also told me at the same time is that sometimes resenting a task actually creates additional avenues to solve for the same problem. Because your guy resented sales, but it's like, oh, I hate this so much, but I still have to do it.
Yeah.
So I need to figure out an alternative way that some other people may not be thinking about.
Exactly.
So that kind of like leads to innovation as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be additional opportunities around what you can do to like amplify overall results, right?
So in this podcast, we also have a tradition.
Oh.
When we go close to the end, we have a card game that is about like more of a personal question stuff.
Here we go.
And you choose your card and you answer. So you can pick up your card, and just before you answer this, I also have some closing questions that you can just answer them like quick.
Okay.
But like all about relevant to what we spoke about today, that I believe it's going to be a really good add-on at the end.
Okay.
And again, they're personal. So the first one is like, what's the best advice you've ever received about running a business?
Treat your people well, because if you have a really positive work environment, that pays off more than anything else.
And what's the worst?
The worst? Focus purely profit. Because it takes the human component out of a business.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And what's a belief you had about business at first that completely changed over the years as you've grown?
That it was easy.
And you realized?
Yeah, I think you learn something new every single day, right?
That's good.
Yeah.
Let's go with the card.
I have one more question there. What is it that you think that people overvalue in business, yet it's not that important?
That's a good one.
Awards.
Awards?
Yeah, when you win awards for stuff, like best this, best that, like the majority of those awards is you pay for them anyway. But I think it's also a business in itself, right? So there are genuine award bodies where getting an award from them is really, really valuable, but then the market is flooded with like thousands of others where it doesn't mean much, right? So yeah, I think that is one.
So that's the card game. If you pick up an action card, just draw another one.
Pick another one.
Like,
is it an action card or you see 3 questions on it?
3 questions.
Okay. What are those questions? And just pick the one that's the least comfortable to answer.
Okay. What would an ideal social life look like to you? How does that differ from now? How often have you looked in the mirror in the last 24 hours? Are you or have you been addicted to anything? If not, do you think you could be? I can answer that last one. Have I been addicted to stuff? Yeah, certainly. Like, I think I have a very addictive personality. So gaming was a big one.
So do I.
Yeah, so gaming was one that really sucked away a lot of hours in my life. I think socials can also be pretty intense, right? Especially like the short form video scrolling things. I have a trick to negate that though. Like I basically summarize, because you can look at your phone to see like where you're using a lot of time, right? Especially through social channels.
The screen time.
And what I did is I basically calculated the amount of time that I waste on a monthly basis, scaled that to a year, and then basically said, okay, if I use this time more productively in another area of my life, what would that lead to? And whenever I catch myself really wasting time, like I remind myself of that specifically. So yeah, that.
But you still allow yourself to do it, just less, I guess, or you
Well,
have completely.
I think the
erased
easiest
it.
way to get like to stop something is just to go cold turkey.
Yeah.
So like I don't really drink anymore. I barely game. Like there's the odd time when I'm like on a commute where I would pull up like the mobile game, but desktop gaming is out because
that's the one. That
I mean,
is
I also
draining.
have kids, right? I like I could be spending more time with them rather than like sitting in front of a screen. And then when you have work, kids at home, family and everything else, there's only so many hours of the day you have to yourself, and then like you don't really want to waste them away.
Yeah, totally. But if it's like a console fun game with the kids,
Oh, with the kids, hells yeah.
I mean, that's the restriction I put in myself, because I was used to be addicted in like video games, playing, like wasted so much time of my life there when I was earlier in life. So for me, the rule I've put on is like I can play only with friends, on a group setting with friends.
I think that's a really good rule.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
I would set that.
Play console. I don't play desktop games anymore. But if it's a desktop game, it's only gonna be like for a while with some friends and like once in a while. So I just stopped playing on my own, and that helped a lot.
What about you, Adam? Gaming addictions?
Not anymore. I completely cut it out. I used to play a lot of video games when I was a teenager. So I was just rushing home from school, so I could just like throw my backpack like, "Hey guys, I'm here. Okay, let's go." Yeah. So that was my life. And then after that, I think I just started to value and prioritize other things.
Okay.
And I also realized that when I make that kind of excuse for myself that I don't have time for something, and when I actually take a stock of how I spend my time, that's when I realized that something needs to go.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that I chose, that I don't really need in my life. The only games that I play is purely offline.
Yeah.
I don't even have a single game on my phone.
Well, those you can just like quit whenever you want. Like when you're stuck in that multiplayer game and like your teammates are depending on you and you have like a child screaming in the corner, you're like, no,
no, I can't. I'm in a team fight. Wait.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Any last drop of wisdom, advice to people who are on their journey to start their business or just trying to find a way to gain more freedom?
I think starting a business and enjoy the process, right? Like I think when you're in it, it's just like watching a child grow. Like you forget how much time you invested. And if you really have a business that like, especially in the very beginning, every 6 months to a year, you look back and it's a completely different business. Like you will learn more along the way. You will discover more about yourself. You will learn about like team dynamics and also your ability to lead people. And I think as the business grows, really, really important, your capabilities will shift from being from executional when it's just you to being a lot more strategic, to then like in the end being strategic and managerial, right? And I think across that journey, you're going to evolve yourself significantly.
Awesome.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I think this was great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.